Hey everybody, it's Dr. Lauterbach. I'm here to talk to you about Module 3, Week 3, and we're going to talk about motivation. So there are three big groups of theories about motivation. There are content theories, process theories, and attribution theories. We only deal with the content and the process theories this week, and Borkowski handles them, content theories in Chapter 5 and process theories in Chapter 6. Then we also have another assigned reading, which is the Boyatzkis article about an ideal self as a driver of intentional change. I'm going to come back to that. But first, let's take a look at the week. So this is your key point PowerPoint. It's pretty straightforward. Going to be introduced to the theories that seek to explain and predict, two different levels of theory there, why individuals act and react in predictable ways in the context of an organization. As we said, there are three types of theories, and they are shown here. The three types of theories are central to the concepts of organizational behavior, which is the study of individual and group dynamics inside an organization. So why would you care? Organizational leaders can get better at what they're doing by understanding organizational behavior. And they too are subject to all these various forces of motivation. So an understanding of organizational behavior enables a leader, because they have now a new capacity, to understand their organization, but also to understand themselves, and to be able to reflect on their own leadership. And reflection is a key component to growth as a leader. Knowledge of motivation will be useful to the leader again later in the course when we talk about ethics and justice. So that's this week. Next week, we talk about attribution theory, which I think is very interesting and something that has been important in my own leadership and being led, because attribution theory can go in a lot of different directions. There are some things I should tell you about content theories. In particular, is that there are some weaknesses. None of these are the perfect explanation for organizational behavior, or why people do what they do in organizations. Content theories, which are really about an internal process for somebody, have a couple of problems. One of them is this concept of universality. They claim that everybody reacts in the same way, irrespective of their gender, culture, maybe other factor differences. Most were developed in the United States, and it can only represent probably middle-class America business needs and values in the period that they were developed, which was from the 1940s to the 1970s. The other thing, and this is pretty concerning, is that there's really not much data. They really haven't been testable theories. People haven't been able to prove these theories through studies. For example, Maslow, which we all, as nurses, are very familiar with, is actually just based on opinion. There's no research at all behind Maslow. And others are biased samples, like only males, only accountants, only engineers. And in some instances, evidence was found that didn't support the theory that was just ignored, and or the theory was tried to refine their theory to make it fit, which is not the process for testing a theory. Another thing is there are this concept that people are static, that they are developmental, which is counterintuitive to us as nurses. I assume you have picked up on this through your education as a nurse, is that one of our core tenets is that people are developing over time. And so as nurses, we would have some difficulty with content theories because people are not that stable. About the only thing that's that stable that we study would be personality theories like Carl Jung, which seems to be short of really catastrophic or enormous life events pretty stable. If you're one kind of personality, you tend to be that way. That formation happens early in life and doesn't change. That's about the only thing that we study and the only theories that we borrow to bring into nursing that has this concept of someone being kind of static. For a motivational theory, that is a real weakness. And so that's something to know about content theories. And the other thing is they're just too simple. They assume that the connection between needs and behavior is not problematic. If you have a need, you're going to take action. Well, there may be barriers to you taking action that would be undermine motivation. And they ignore the processes, which we're going to study next week, it's the second chapter in this module, must be evaluated and implemented to achieve the desired end result. So think about that as you're reading chapter 6. Overall, they're just too simplistic to account for the complexity of a real world. But despite these criticisms, the theories have been critical in focusing attention on motivation and the importance of needs. And they have helped managers evaluate their own perceptions about their employees and themselves, and they've also helped to provide the basis for future study. Process theories have some limitations, but not to the extent that the content theories do. The process theories have been tested. They do have research behind them. Some of it's quite surprising. I have a limit to how much information I can give you in a module to be reasonable, but there is a lot of information that might surprise you about the process theories. Dan Pink, if you ever wanted to see something rather entertaining, go look at his video about what motivates people. Dan Pink, P-I-N-K, you can YouTube it. It's astounding. Money does not motivate people, except for piecework. If you give somebody who's working in an absolute task-oriented job that requires no creativity, simply doing a process, like think of it like working on an assembly line and turning a screw. If you give them more money, they will start turning screws faster. But everything else, increasing compensation actually is a demotivator. What is a motivator? Meaningful work. So if you want to see the proof for that assertion, go ahead and YouTube Dan Pink motivation. You'll be surprised at what you see there. But Borkowski does a good job on process theory, so I didn't throw more at you. So let me talk a little bit about the problem with self. And that is the problem with that. Boyatzkis, I should tell you, is a researcher who's been working out of Case Western Reserve with a group of researchers there about leadership for a long time, and he is highly respected. And actually his model, called inspirational leadership, is my favorite model for leadership. We don't teach it in this course, but it's a great model. But the problem, as I see it, is this word, the ideal self, is a driver of intentional change. That word self is the problem, and I'll show you why. If he had just said the aspiration to be better as the driver of intentional change, nobody would have any problems with it. Let's go take a look at Maslow, and I'll try to explain why that can be a problem. I'm flipping through the book here. Sorry for doing this. Here we go. Okay. So, talking now about the highest level of need, which is self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy. And here are the things. This is just a page right out of your book. Acceptance and realism. Okay? Self-actualized people have realistic perceptions of themselves, others, and the world around them, and they accept that. So here's the problem. Generally, when people talk about self, they're talking about a construct that people make about themselves, which is not their real self. It is something they make up. They make it up because of input that they get over the course of their life, or experiences that they have, or other people's false attributions about them tell them that they're not good enough and that they need to be something different. So they create the self. This is absolutely Buddhist thinking, just so you know, if you want to know a whole lot about this concept of self, you would look into some of the Buddhist teaching. But in any event, it's been adopted by psychology, and it's in the mainstream. It isn't just a fringe kind of a concept. So here's the problem. When you're using the word self, it's generally taken to mean this unachievable, idealized, even the words that Boyatzkis used, this idealized thing, this thing that we create in our minds to define what we think we ought to be. And that goes against the concept of acceptance. What would be the preferred thing is to say, people always want to be better. And that's true. And we have that in a lot of nursing theories. The one, that I'm most familiar with that has that concept is Modeling and Role Modeling by Helen Erickson, because that's the model I'm most familiar with in terms of actually using the model. That's fine. But if you say self, now what we're talking about is that you've created this false entity that you now embrace, think you should be because you are not good enough, just who you are. You don't accept that you are good and worthy just being who you are. And then what happens is you have to defend against the attacks you see at you being this self you've created. So it leads to closed thinking, it leads to defensiveness, and it leads to a lot of heartache. So when you read the article, I would really appreciate it if in your mind you would think aspiring to be better rather than in idealized self. So kind of deep into this topic, but it's a real key point. I like the rest of that article. I just don't like that word self, and I wanted to let you know that. So that's kind of it. I hope you enjoy the readings. I think this is fascinating, and I'm even more excited about next week with attribution theory because I've seen it so badly played out in the real world. And it's an important part of self-awareness and reflection of a leader to be mindful of attribution. So see you on the discussion board. As always, reach out to me if there's anything that's confusing. Send me an email, a text, give me a call, put it on discussion board, and I'll look forward to seeing what you have to say. I hope you have a great week.